weird, different place when I wake up. Um, and this is there's several steps and layers because it's like it's rising through consciousness from a state of non or a state of highly different, you know, hypnagogic and dream states and all that. And like pretty much one of the first things I do when I'm conscious is worry about my phone. And by my phone, I basically just mean interface with the rest of humanity. Uh, do I have messages? Am I urgently needed? Now, I'm never really needed. And that's a thing that I guess you could say that that's kind of a form of PTSD. I've really only been urgently requested once in my life, like really urgently requested. And it was uh, a really bad situation. And I think it permanently changed how I relate to communications technology. Initially, it manifested just as the phone, right? But it just metastasized. And so that's some background for why when I start becoming conscious, the first thing I really want to do is worry about my phone, worry about my messages, anticipate what I'm gonna likely see, plausible worst case and best case scenarios. Excuse me. And as part of that, I often will talk to people I care about in a mental state of having just woke up, almost post seizure, kind of state where your mind is really open and really, because I feel like I have sleep issues anyway. Like I sleep in weird chunks. I sleep a lot, but not in long stretches. Um, I don't really have a way to easily record that. I really wish I had some kind of halo I could wear that would like do brain states for 24 hours so I could see, all of it and look at it like here's sleep, here's wake, here's anxiety, here's headache, and do some correlations and stuff. Oh, I'd like to know myself, maybe detect some patterns, maybe fix some things. But I don't live in a culture. I live in a vending machine, basically. Capitalism, America is a large vending machine. And I could really go down a number of roads from there, like talk about what I mean by a vending machine, talk about the history that caused me to have that event, why it is I jump on data, or talk about what it is that we talked about. And I suppose that's the best because it's the most suitable for public consumption. I will link to, I guess it's not really relevant how the conversation got started, and that would just be an invasion of privacy on their part. And it's not really, uh, basically, I got into a discussion about four books that really oriented me in terms of how I see reality. And I will link to the books in the description. And it's Holographic Universe by Talbot, uh, Golda Escherbach, Eternal Golden Braid, uh, the first Chaos Math book, and Mapping the Mind by Rita Carter. Now, Rita Carter's book kind of is a placeholder. It's not really like it's just a pop sci book on neurology. You know, the state of neurology at the time that I read it. And that's not the definitive one. Like I don't have a definitive one. I just liked mapping the mind because it was aimed at a general audience, and it was trying to be informative, and it's basically just a snapshot of here's what we know about the brain as a machine as far as we can tell. Here's a whole bunch of long standing data that really does provide utility, you know. And it's just kind of a hollow nexus point for linking up the other three. Like if I were to diagram them, the Rita book would be in the middle with the other three as a triangle around it, because it's like they link in almost flux capacitor, you know? It's like it's that shape, three wings and a center. Um, they represent neurology, of course, the center, because it's like that's the lens through which we have to view everything. And then philosophy, which is GEB, you know, Gödel, Escherbach, and math, which is, you know, the hard logic of interrelationships, however you want to frame it, and cosmology, the large scale idea of what it is that we're sitting in. What is this thing that we're in, you know? And it led into a concept of materialism and reductionism. And those are both useful, but they're also narrow and hyper limited. There's only so many things they can address. Like they ignore the subjective, in effect, for example. And another thing is that it reminds me of problem solving and non problem solving states of consciousness. Like when I'm dreaming, I'm not really solving problems, but I need dreams, you know, as a feeling thing, you know, a thing which has sensations, you know. I keep thinking, I don't know exactly the word for that. It's like senescent, but that feels old. Sentient, but that's like that's got connotations about knowing, and I feel like the word I'm looking for. I need to ask the AI because it'll nail it down for me. But it's like the ability to feel, you know, the ability to suffer, the ability to experience pleasure. Uh, not you know, Homo sapien and brains and stuff and cephalopods. I mean, like just a plant reacting to pain, and it's like there's the range between that and me. You know, it's like when I react to pain, I feel pain. You know, I feel a sense of suffering, and I know that basically all the mammals do, and most of the lizards, I'm sure, do. You know, it's like it's disturbingly simple, because you can have frogs and stuff that are like this freaking big, you know, like a little salamander that'll fit on a penny, and it's more than complex enough to suffer. And I feel like worms probably can too, you know. And this goes into Jainism, you know, where you like filter everything because you don't want to smush stuff. I try not to crush bugs, you know, because it's like the hardware for suffering is really efficient, which is awful. It's one of the reasons nature is hell. It's like, oh my God, man, it's like something the size of a grain of sand can hurt. That sucks. Pain should be something you have to build. It needs to be something gigantic and tightly controlled so that's not so it doesn't happen by accident. But man, that is the opposite of nature. God, they just baked into everything. And that goes into hedonism, you know, that's like the ground floor of existence, you know, like in a philosophical sense, like I exist because I can feel things. And it's like there's an I there to feel things, and that's what I am. And it's like without feeling, I'm not there. Uh, yeah, it's like the you have to really, but yeah, it's all complicated, and we're in this thing, and it's wildly elaborate. And to orient yourself, I feel like you need compass points, and those books serve as really good elaborations on each compass point, like informational spaces that serve as landmarks to, do some orienteering and be like, okay, so that's east, that's from here, it's like, oh, so this is where I am, you are here, we're standing on the map and here's the dot, but reality is also the map. It's just a thing, that's a wild thing. Because like what I was saying about materialism and reductionism, it's like you can learn a lot about the large scale by studying the small scale, and I feel like that's because at the ground floor of reality, stuff like time and distance aren't really things. I feel like they're emergent, like they're processing shortcuts or something. I don't feel like they're real. Like I feel like the reality, the stuff of reality is non-local, and that means it doesn't have like shape. It doesn't have these properties, and humans can't think that way. Our processing system was evolved in it was evolved for very specific, very hyper narrow purposes, which is why we're basically blind. You look at the electromagnetic spectrum and it's like this big wide thing, and our little vision, is right here, and it's like, we can't see shit. And I feel like that extends to not just sensory input, but like cognitive. Like there's stuff that we can't register, we can't grapple with, we can't process with. It's like a software incompatibility. Like, and I think that basic, easy to arrive at truth comes from is the inspiration for stuff like Lovecraft, where he's like certain data can make you mad. It's like if it's like how certain data can crash a computer. It's like I feel like there's stuff you could see, stuff you could say, stuff you could hear that would just make you catatonic. And while there is the obvious MK Ultra connotation there, Jacob's Ladder, where like whatever that stuff is going to traumatize you into silence or brain death, effectively. It's like that's not what I mean. I don't mean the edge lord scaring somebody to death, shit, or hurting them to death. What I mean is like there's data out there that is just so alien that it would crash our brain. And maybe that's part of the reason why our perceptions are so narrow, is to avoid stuff that crashes your brain. Like there's a character in a Peter Watts book, his idea of vampires, and he calls it the crucifix glitch. Like this ancient species of hominid that hunted hominids, they're the basis of vampires. And there aren't right angles in nature easily, really precise ones. Like there's branches that cross, right? But there's always a little slight variance. They're never meh. Like you can get perfect spirals in nature, but you can't really get perfect right angles. So more or less. And the idea is that their brains ended up hyper vulnerable to that orientation of data. Like if they saw a cross, it gave them a seizure because their brain, couldn't handle it. And I feel like there's stuff like that for people too. And like I can't even speculate what it is, of course, because I'm a human, But it's just like imagining that information space. I feel like there's stuff like that. And this is the kind of thing I think about, when I'm first waking up, and especially if somebody asks me some kind of real, interesting, makes a substantive comment of some kind, not just tasks, day to day stuff, but like, sitting and pondering and trying to work out how stuff is. And I wanted to catch it, and also, creates the sensation of connecting with the rest of my species and stuff. Because it is ironic how isolated we all feel if the ground floor of reality is non-local, because that means we're all on top of each other, like materially in a I say materially, but I mean like in a cosmological ground floor sense. See, that's one of the reasons why you need the books, is because there's like language, and it's all, but it grew up in this space, so it's got limits too. And I'm trying to, explain concepts that really don't fit well into English. And the problem with English is it's so foamy. Like it's you can in trying to explain a concept, you can talk for decades. Basically, like it's not informationally dense enough. The only way you can get it to be informationally dense is to use shortcuts, and like a word, like I say something like universe, right? It's like, well, that's a clear example of a huge everything fitting into a meaningless, string of gibberish sounds that represent this whole huge thing. But it's like math. It's like you can constantly be measuring and drawing, and it's like the whole geometry of anything. It's like you imagine a glass, and then imagine all the math you could do to that glass, kind of annotated around it, right? It's like, here's the circumference, here's the height, here's the depth, here's the mass, here's the volume, and then weird little, angles and parabolas. It's just, and it starts to look like that meme of the confused dog doing the math. It's like, cosines and all this other crap around him. It's like English is like that. You're speaking around the glass. Like, I can give you the math, but I can't hand you the glass. And I can go on and on and on and on infinitely about the math around that glass, right? But I can also just say that glass on the table. And there's like meaning loss and compression there, and perspective and all that nonsense. And that's why it's so hard to communicate, and why real communication is inherently destructive. Like if you if I connect to another brain, we will instantaneously become one brain. Like we won't be separate people anymore, because we'll become part of the same sensorium, the same cognition. It'll, like, I feel like that's why people individually come one to a brain, typically come one to a brain, like with the exception being people with multiple personalities. But obviously that's extremely rare and hard to arrive at. The general lean is that it's one consciousness to a brain. And the more we interconnect, the better we communicate, the less individual we become, and the more collective we become. And I feel like that's the basis of eusociality. You have ants and honeybees, and the carryover between that and people is related to Hellstrom's Hive. I have had cause to recommend that to a friend to read, and he really liked it. And it's like, I feel like humanity is speciating, and it kind of goes to our tools, cell phones and stuff. There's an idea that one of the ways you can escape your meat brain is to basically add external functionality to it until you have so much cognitive power outside your skull that the loss of what's inside your skull will no longer feel relevant. Like, and I can see the mechanism of that, because it's like, I've lost my time sense, more or less, because I had watches as a kid, and then later cell phone, and then computer. I have never needed to keep track of it. Like when you're a kid, all the time is kept track of for you. The alarm makes noise, the parents make noise, the teachers make noise, and they use the clock. But effectively, you don't need a clock until you're like older. And so I never really had a time sense. It's like I just experienced stuff, and I had kind of a targeting sense, like, near, far, soon, late, Christmas is coming, my birthday is coming, that kind of thing, and how far away they might be. Halloween is coming. But I feel like you can expand that situation. Like, I definitely feel like a huge portion of me what I would call me in a soul real sense is dependent on my computer. That computer is effectively a chunk of my brain. And the stuff that it does is needed to be me. Like when you're just talking to me in a room, you're getting a very partial, limited version. That's what I feel like. Because there is a lot of stuff my brain, to save energy, just outsources. You know, it's like links and concepts. I've lost the names, I've lost the dates because I know that I can fetch them here if needed. So yeah, it's like we are all externalized and isolated, but we're not. But at the same time, in order to be individuals, we have to have that isolation. And that requires walls. I mean, it's like the difference between one room and four rooms is walls. You know, it's like chambers in a honeycomb. It's like it's either it's the inside of a bucket or it's a hive, and the difference is differentiation and walls and separations. You know, so I'd ramble a bit and share, and you know, maybe there's something useful there for somebody. I'll also like the transcript and feed it to the AI and see what's going on. Lou, get down from there. Get down from there. I don't know why he does that. He likes to jump up on the uh, Instant Pot. There's nothing up there. There's no food or nothing. It's just, I guess it's somewhere he can go, so he goes there occasionally. Uh, but thanks for watching.